Well, great. We've picked up attendees. We've started to pick up a number, so that's wonderful. Again, this is Chris Linenberger. I am a development specialist with the Texas Homeless Network, and you are listening to the April 2016 Bloc Talk webinar. This is a webinar that we do every month, and the goal here is to highlight best practices that are happening around housing around the state, so that we can get those best practices out there, and so that you, being the attendees, have a chance to ask questions of those that are on this Bloc Talk and that are presenting. And so that's the nice thing about this webinar, is that we can give you real-time feedback in answering questions. So yes, so don't be afraid to raise your hand at any time, or post a question at any time. We do have a couple of people here monitoring the webinar to make sure that all questions get answered. So of course, every month I like to have a meme, and so this one, you know, here in Texas, we've received a lot of rain in Central Texas, which is great because our lakes are all filled up and we have plenty of drinking water now, which is wonderful. However, it's nice to have, for many different animals, including us, to have a little bit of playtime in the mud. So I thought you guys would enjoy that. And we're hoping that the rain will keep coming. I know here in Austin we're slated for more rain tonight. So just to review the agenda for the Bloc Talk, and this pretty much stays pretty stagnant. So we'll do a couple of housekeeping and announcements pieces. Then our presentation for today is through the San Antonio Homeless Coalition, or SARA. And then after that, as I mentioned, we will have about a good 15 minutes for any questions to be posed, and we will make sure we take time to answer all of those questions. And then at the end, I will do some closing and follow-up for you guys. So around announcements, or actually around housekeeping, just a reminder, everybody's microphone is muted at this time. We do that because if we do not mute individuals for these webinars, then we do get a ton of feedback. And the feedback just it hurts everybody and their ability to participate and to follow along in the webinar. So although we've muted you at this time, please feel free to use the toolbar that's has the big arrow going at it there, and that you will also see at your screen to post any questions. So if you have a question at any point in time in this webinar over the practices that are going on, or just any other general questions, feel free to post that there. We do have somebody monitoring the questions to make sure we get to all those questions. And then also at the bottom of that little toolbar, you will see there is a chat box as well. And so chat is a little bit different, to where the chat immediately can go out to specific audiences. And so if you are having an audio or visual problem, or something else is happening tech-wise, feel free to get on your chat and shoot us a little chat message that something is not working correctly, and we will get to that as well. So you're muted. Post the questions, and then of course we always record these videos and post them to the Texas Homeless Network YouTube page. So feel free to go back at any point in time and or turn even other fellow employees back to our webinars that we put out there on our webpage. We have webinars posted, I believe, from the last I think it's 15 months now. So we've been doing this for a little while, and so there should be quite a few of them out there. Feel free to get online and look through those and find, take some information out there that you can use to implement within your community around housing. So a reminder, this is the monthly Bloc Talk, just a little bit that on Texas Homeless Network, and that we are serving homeless communities throughout Texas and their homeless population. The way we do this is by exploring successful practices that are happening around the state. In this webinar, what we seek to do is bring guest speakers in that can talk firsthand about a practice that they've established or that is they are establishing within their area. And more importantly, have those professionals here so that you can ask questions to them. So again, today we will have approximately a 15 to 20 minute presentation followed by approximately 15 minutes of question and answer. So as I mentioned before, feel free to put in those questions at any point in time. We will get back to those we will get to those as quickly as possible in the order that they came in. And then for next month, the month of May, I'm trying really hard and desperately to get the Waco Continuum of Care to present about homeless practices that are happening in their area. So so I hope to update you guys with that probably about 2 to 3 weeks before the actual webinar, but that is what we're working on at this time. Also, just a reminder that Texas Homeless Network is a nonprofit membership-based organization that provides solutions to ending homelessness in Texas communities through education, resources, and advocacy. If you want to know more about our agency and what we do here, feel free to visit us at THN.org. That's THN.org. Couple of other things, definitely a reminder that our 2016 Texas Conference on Ending Homelessness will be September 21st and 23rd, and that will be located here in Austin, Texas at the Omni South Park. So I know many of you guys have been here before and have visited the Omni with us, and we are rotating that conference around the state. However, we're trying to bring it back to Austin on a kind of a every other year basis. So feel free to go to our website and sign up for the conference. It's a wonderful 2 days, 2 days of just great workshops and information. And then also at the same time as doing these Bloc talks, we are also doing SOAR webinars on a quarterly basis that we will be bringing you quickly as well. And then to sign up to get updates around our either SOAR webinars or conferences or Bloc talks, please go to our website, and there actually is a box there that you can click on to sign up for all updates. That'll put you on a list, and you'll get emailed all the updates that are coming in around trainings that we're offering either online or in person. And then finally, just our mailing information. And then our my email or the general email address is training@thn.org. So if you have any questions or any suggestions around the Bloc talk or any of our other trainings that you would like to submit, you can always do that in the evaluation, as well as contacting me specifically through training@thn.org. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Bill Hubbard. Bill Hubbard is the Executive Director of SARA, which stands for the South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless. Bill, did I get that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Awesome. So Bill, I'll give it to you, and then I'm also unmuting Trenton as well.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to Texas Homeless Network for hosting the Bloc Talk this month and asking us to participate in the presentation. Very quickly, I want to just give you a little background about the organization that Trenton Clark represents, and that's Samm Ministries here in San Antonio. Samm Ministries was founded as a result of a rather tragic incident in downtown San Antonio that happened in 1981. When a homeless individual was found deceased on the grounds of the First Presbyterian Church after a very, very, very cold night. It sparked a lot of conversation amongst our faith-based population and the congregations in the downtown area. And in 1983, 11 of those congregations came together and formed the nucleus of the San Antonio Metropolitan Ministries, which is the acronym SAM. From 1983 until today, they have grown from an all-volunteer organization to 80 staff members, multiple housing programs, and they are a leader in our community in homeless prevention. I believe, and Trenton, you can correct me, but they have prevented at least 20,000 San Antonians from homelessness over the last few years.
Yeah.
As far as Trent goes, Trent is the Vice President of Programs at Samm Ministries. He's been there for 5 years. Prior to that, he spent 12 years with Catholic Charities in upstate New York, and I suspect one of the reasons he came to San Antonio because he got tired of the winters in upstate. He has a master's in public economics and an MBA. And with no further introduction, I would like to turn the presentation over to Trenton and offer my apologies because I had a prior commitment. I'm going to have to jump off of here, but I hope you enjoy our presentation, and I hope you come to San Antonio and visit us soon. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. And Trenton, I'm giving the screen control over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris and Bill. So I just want to go over, let me see, show my screen. Okay. What we want to talk a little bit about today. And let's see, our agenda, just a brief overview, and Bill already basically covered that about Samm Ministries. And then I wanted to look at, there's been some interesting research in the past couple of years that have come out of New Orleans and post-Katrina, and also some recent economic mobility research, and how does that inform us when we're thinking about permanent supportive housing, and how does that give us some insights on how we should be thinking about how we are part of our communities, and we really are. We're a big part of our community, and then just a little bit about our Samm Ministries permanent supportive housing program, and then we'll have some questions if you have any. The mission of Samm Ministries, we're an interfaith ministry whose mission is to help the homeless and those at risk of becoming homeless attain self-sufficiency by offering with dignity and compassion shelter, housing, and services. And Samm Ministry also provides volunteers opportunities to be renewed and fulfilled as they serve. And the reason that mission is important to us, and we haven't strayed from it for pretty much the past 30 years. As we look at where we want to go and what we want to be, and volunteers have always been an important part of Samm Ministry. So they're actually in our mission statement. As we continue forward, we at one time, as Bill was saying, we started in the basement of the First Presbyterian Church in downtown San Antonio. There was 11 congregations, Catholic, Protestant, and Temple Bethel, that all joined together to meet the crisis of homelessness, which really started showing itself in the 80s, and we didn't have a response. Our cities didn't have a response, and so that's how we came to be. We provided emergency shelter in the beginning. We spun off. We're not affiliated with any particular denomination today. But as the need became so great, we became our own 501(c), and still have support, of course, from the congregations. But we're a separate 501(c). As time went on, we started with emergency shelter, and from that point we've moved into permanent supportive housing, homeless prevention, transitional housing, and the wraparound services that go with this, and also recently some rapid rehousing also. Anyway, looking at Bexar County, in 2015 we counted 2891. In Bexar County, and that's been slowly declining. It's been up and down a little bit. But it's been relatively flat the past couple of years. Maybe up a little bit. We're doing a better count now and then. And Sam, when you're thinking about the cause, the reasons people are in homeless situations, we're serving a combination of those that are there for purely economic reasons, families that just because of long-term poverty, because of the economics of where they at, are unable to remain housed. And then we're also serving of those individuals that are struggling with untreated mental illness and substance abuse issues and things of that nature. So we're kind of doing both. Our programs can be divided in 6 major areas. We have a homeless prevention program, and about 60 of our total budget, we have Samm Ministries has a budget of right around $10 million a year, and about 65% of that is privately raised, meaning just private donations, private fundraising from foundations, et cetera, and then individuals, and 35% come from federal and state sources. So the homeless prevention program started out private, and then we got some of the initial prevention money, and now we're back to all private again. And we have a part of that is a prevention program just for seniors, and then we focus also just on families with that. We have a Veterans Housing Stability Program from Texas Veterans Commission. We have a series of rapid housing programs that are largely funded by HUD ESG and HUD Continuum of Care, and through both the city and TDHCA. We have transitional housing. We in 1999 we bought a convent that had 40 units, and we're utilizing that for transitional housing as an intensive program. I know transitional housing isn't the vogue right now, as far as at least from HUD's perspective, but we've really seen good luck, and not luck, but we've seen good results from our transitional housing. We're going to be committed to that. We also have 100 homeless set-aside vouchers that we administer for the city. And then what I want to talk about today is permanent supportive housing. And where that fits in, and that's and that is that's going to be most research has shown that that's the direction that we want to go for permanently solving homelessness, and particularly getting at the prioritization of those most at need and those most in danger, both physically, mentally, and socially from their homeless experience. But what I wanted to drop back a little bit on, there was there's been some recent work. The paper is called "The Natural Experiment of the Consequences of Concentration in Former Prisoners." That's a little bit misleading of what they really got at, but it's by David Kirk, and it's from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in April 15. It's also, if you're just a more of a layperson's, you can get actually this is one of the paper that you can get directly online without having to buy the darned academic journal or be an academic. You can download his whole thing there. But it was also reviewed by Malcolm Gladwell in the New Yorker in August of 16. It's just a great article. But so what happened was what he did was, that horrible disaster of Katrina, it created a situation where we had whole neighborhoods that were destroyed and just gone. And really what he's talking about there is it created a natural experiment. It was a randomized event. We didn't know, you couldn't predict one neighborhood from the next, except it was concentrated in the Ninth Ward, obviously. So we had one day, people were in their neighborhoods where they had lived for many generations. And the very next day, the very next week, a large swath of them simply had no place to go. They were gone. They were, internal refugees inside the United States that they had to move. There was nothing there. And so as we look into the future, 1, 3, and he's doing an 8-year study now, what were the implications of that? What happened to the families that had to leave, and what happened to the families that had the choice of staying? And the way he looked at it is he said, let's pick a particular set. So they looked at 3,000 individuals who were convicted of felonies, who were all from New Orleans, and were released between 2001 and 2007. And so, in general, what they found was that prior to Katrina, the vast majority of people who were convicted of felonies, who were from New Orleans, returned to New Orleans when they were released. So, but what happened with Katrina, so unlike prior to Katrina, a percentage of this population simply could not return to their own neighborhoods, because the neighborhoods didn't exist. They were destroyed. So these individuals had no choice but to move. They were forced to move. And so what his model that he put together looked at was, let's take a look at the recidivism rates for the individuals based on their zip codes of where they lived after they released, after they found housing after they were released. And it won them 3 years, and like I said, he's going to have an 8-year study coming up. And also look at the concentration of released individuals within particular zip codes. So he looked at, did particular zip codes have a large concentration of individuals who were coming out? of prison. And and the findings were stark. Those that were able to return home, that were able to return to their old neighborhoods, their old social structures, their old friends, had recidivism rates of 60%. Those who were unable to return, so that was a substantial portion of them were unable due to the not having a home there at all or a neighborhood to return to, had recidivism rates of 45%. So it was a substantial difference in what happened to them over that 3-year period. And the results also showed that the more concentrated the release zip codes were, the higher the recidivism. So those zip codes that received a substantial concentration of individuals who've been released, those people who moved to those zip codes also had higher rates of recidivism. And so, and as we know from what we all do, is that we can see how that can happen, as felonies are one of the huge barriers to housing. And when we find zip codes that are willing to work with us on housing people with criminal histories, they tend to be concentrated in those zip codes, because that's where we can find housing. But is that the direction we want to go, given these results? The second part of it is, kind of taking a look at why. What's going on that just locationally you have the stark differences in results. And along with the Kirk study is and maybe some of you saw about this about a year and a half ago. Where is the land of opportunities? The geography of intergenerational mobility in the U.S. And that's by Chetty, Hendren, and Says. And that was published in the National Bureau of Economic Research in 2014. I think those guys are all out of Harvard. But what they did is they studied 40 million children and their parents, and they wanted to describe features of intergenerational mobilities in the U.S. So what were some features that could predict if a child, if we could look at a child who was born in a particular socioeconomic situation, and what were some of the features that would predict or not if that child would stay in that socioeconomic situation for their life, or would they break into if they were in the lower quintile, would they break into the middle class? And what they found was that the variables, to me, it's empowering, and also, kind of something for us to think about at the local level. They found that the actual variables that allow very low-income families to enter the middle class they are not national variables. They are factors that arise from our immediate environment, from the immediate environment and community that the individual is born to. So what they found was the averages vary substantially by area. So one of the worst, for example, was Charlotte, North Carolina. And, the probability of a child in the bottom quintile reaching over their life the top quintile of national income distribution was 4%. So some, a small percentage did. If you looked at Salt Lake City, it was double that. It was 10.2%. I believe San Jose was at 12.9%. So you were looking at, just by where you happen to be born within the U.S., having substantially different probabilities of being able to break out of poverty over your life and entering the middle class. So in some ways, it's stark. I don't mean that national priorities aren't important, that we need the support from national policymakers, et cetera, but we also have some work to do at the local level to look at why those things are so. So what he did is he said, so why is that? And what did they find as some of the differences between these communities and what was going on? And so what their models show, and it's a normal sociological research, they control for a variety of variables. But so some of the factors that made a statistical difference between the ability of these children to raise out of their situation was if the community had higher levels of racial integration, and lower levels of income inequality within the community as a whole. So even if you lived in a very poor zip code within your community, if your city as a whole had a lower level of income inequality, you stood a much better chance of breaking out. Good schools, and good schools meaning that the massive difference that we see sometimes between 5 miles within a city, between one school and the other, didn't exist. So you'd have, not that the schools performed as well in all the zip codes, but that you wouldn't have these huge variations between high-performing schools in one zip code and extremely low-performing schools in other zip codes. And they found greater family stability, so a greater level of families that could that didn't lose their children, that were able to stay together at some level, just had a better stability. And higher levels of social capital in the neighborhood, so stronger participation in civic activity. So people participated in civic, in things going on within their community. And actually, if we look at that, and many of you are probably familiar with some of the research of the groundbreaking research of Amy Werner, who did the resiliency studies that came out of Hawaii. She longitudinally studied a set of kids that was born in Hawaii in, I think, 1952. It was the beginning of it, and they followed them up to now. And what we find is some of these 3, 4, and 5 in particular match what she came up with as protective factors for kids that showed resilience throughout their lives. So we start to see how important some of these very local issues are in how we progress and how we move forward as a community, and those for the most vulnerable in our community. So after looking at this, so what does all that have to do with permanent supportive housing? I think there's some implications here and about how we think about our permanent supportive housing and how we conduct our housing services with permanent supportive housing. You know, when we look at placement, for example, when we look at placement within our permanent supportive housing, you know, keeping into account, of course, client, you know, our family choice, but let that, you know, we know what we have available, and so sometimes we say we have choice and look at, you know, what's available is the choice. But do we think about concentration of families and individuals who have felony convictions? I mean, the easy thing to do is, because we find a unit or a complex that is open for us placing people with high barriers to housing, is it still wise for us to then go forward with that and do that when we know that the outcomes of concentrating in family, you know, individuals in particular who have been through this shared experience isn't always positive for those individuals. And then, you know, the local environment for each of our permanent supportive housing units. The factors for upward mobility, you know, they really are, if we look back to those factors, I mean, those protective factors and those community factors, you know, they're difficult to obtain in many of our neighborhoods that we're trying to work in. But, you know, that we need to think about that, particularly when we're choosing and working with the community to decide where our PSH units are going to be, and maybe we need to really start taking into account, in a more serious level, of putting our PSH units at least being a part of healthier neighborhoods, and taking that into account, at least thinking about it, and even the ability to start over geographically and socially. They all would point to a more dispersed within your community permanent supportive housing program, even if it is project-based. And now, obviously, efficiency-wise, it's more efficient on a cost per person basis to have everyone together, because you don't have people traveling all over the place, and PSH takes intensive case management. But just thinking about what's best for our families and for them to be the most successful, I think we really need to think about geographical dispersion. And then, you know, are we seriously looking at diversity and how we encourage placement of our families within permanent supportive housing? And it, not that I think all of us are committed to diversity, and all of us are are fully vested in that, but sometimes we have to be more intentional and really think, are we opening up doors? Are we having people just always live with someone and with other families that are just like them? Maybe we should seriously look at how we encourage diversity in our placement, and then our school systems in relation to where we structure permanent supportive housing. I know for our program, I'll talk about ours in a bit, but we have several permanent supportive housing projects in different school systems in San Antonio, and it's we have to talk about where are you kids going to be successful, and in some of the school systems the kids are going to be more successful than others. So when we're serving the most vulnerable members, of our community, it's very important, I think, for our community's overall success. So PSH, I think, can be a real part of those factors that make for success within a community in general. But I think to be successful, this is not just going to be us as providers of homeless services. We have to be part of an overall development strategy for the community. And and for Samm Ministries, we're looking at this research and thinking about it. I don't think we're there yet. We're getting there, and Bill's really leading a charge on pulling together our community and our community development principles, where we want to go and getting that to providers. But we have a ways to go. But I just believe that it really should be strategically placed in the neighborhoods, and that we're going to have the largest positive impact on families. Versus, the temptation is to go out where we can get the easiest, where it's easiest to place, and where it's easiest to place isn't always the environment that we should have our families in. On the positive side, I think some of this research and some of what we're doing can have a huge impact on the future outcomes within our community. These are local decisions that we as service providers and those who really do care about people who are the most vulnerable in our communities, we can have a real impact here. So it's going to take a team, and it's going to take us working together, because these are complex projects, and there's still a lot of individuals, and there's still a lot of parts of our community that don't really understand permanent supportive housing, and maybe not really, really understanding there or on board with it. Excuse me. Okay. So the purpose of our support of our PSH program is to assist disabled families who are homeless, transition from homelessness to permanent housing, and that's the key, and empower them to live as independently as possible. And the goals of our program is to remain or exit to permanent housing, to remain with us, and that this is permanent housing, and increase their skills and income, achieve and maintain family stabilization, achieve greater self-determination, and achieve financial stability, particularly reducing debt. And and we do know that permanent supportive housing is the Housing and Urban Development's preferred long-term strategy to end homelessness. Of course, as we know, part of the issue with that is the P stands for permanent, and so when we have individuals that are placed in our permanent supportive housing, they stay, and they stay for quite a while. So meaning that if you're not in the process of developing new permanent supportive housing each year, as long as you have a need, as long as you have homeless individuals who are disabled and are unsheltered, you're not going to have a lot of openings. You're going to have a problem. It's just so as far as eligibility, obviously they must meet HUD's definition of homelessness, coming from an emergency shelter on the street. Category 1 is basically fleeing domestic violence. For our program, which is different from many others, we have focused in the past on serving those families that have a minor child in the household, and this is part of our contract that we have. Who are we serving? We're serving chronically homeless, families, and then families that are not chronically homeless under HUD's chronically homeless definition, but are homeless. And we're looking at the clients with high service needs, and the most, and often, the most vulnerable often can be the most challenged to house and keep housed. We have many co-occurring disorders, as do you all. Serve the same thing. Our communities are, we have them spread out. We have what we call the Woodhill Complex, which is a that is a city of that's a San Antonio Housing Authority complex. We've got 24 units there. It's got a private management company that uses it. We have Rosemont at Palo Alto complex. That's a private company. It's Pinnacle Corporation. We have Highland Park complex, which is also Pinnacle, and then we have Franklin Properties, which is which is an artisan property, and that's not project based, so that's going to be Franklin plus other units. So we have a total units of 85. Of those 85, 68 are obviously for homeless category 1, but the 17 units at the bottom there are reserved for chronically homeless and individuals, and chronically homeless by the definition, by the new HUD definition. And all reserved for people with dependent children, and so we've had a bit of an issue with chronically homeless families, because under the definition, what I mean by a bit of an issue is there really aren't not that many chronically homeless families, because after a year of being homeless, literally homeless, most families can't stay together, and so after a year or more of being homeless as a family, you often won't have your children, and then you wouldn't qualify for our program. So we've had a bit of issue, but unfortunately we have those units all full of families who have been homeless for over a year, and within that we have 3.5 FTE personnel working. I have a director who's Jessica Elizondo. She does spend a lot of her time working with our clients too. And then we have 3 other case managers, Leah, Jonathan, and Veronica. And so it's intense work. And to do permanent supportive housing right, you need to be visiting quite frequently. You need to be tying people with intense casework. And keeping them together. It's not something you can check in every just now and then on case management. It's you have to be there, and the complexes want us there. You have a good relationship with the complexes, and they're going to want you there. They're going to call you when they have issues, and that's kind of the key. So just so you can look at kind of what these places look like, this is Rosemont at Highland Park. So it's a nice apartment complex. We have 22 units there, but it's a big complex, and our 22 units are dispersed. They don't have we don't have a wing, and intentionally so. That goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's we want our families, and they are just like all the other families living there, and they just have some higher barriers getting in, and they have some and some learning to do about living with a lease and living with neighbors and getting along, but they really the families rise to the occasion. And I think when we have families living in nice apartment complexes that we can take pride in, they do too, and it only makes sense. And so that's Rosemont, and this is at Highland Park, and this is the other one, Rosemont at Palo Alto. And as you can see, I mean, these are places that we would want to live. It's fine, and so our case managers spend a good portion of their day at these complexes, working directly with apartment staff and with our families. And so, looking at a housing first, that's our method that we're utilizing for our permanent supportive housing. And case managers is at the heart of that. We don't put people, obviously, using housing first and using we don't exit people for not following our program or not choosing to be part of our program. However, what we find, and what we find is most want to be part of our program, and most want to be part of our case management. And it's we utilize harm reduction as best we can, and the key is, of course, is that they don't break their lease, and that's the key that we work with them on, and the key that we work with our complexes on. And so that's really critical to being successful with permanent supportive housing, is landlord relationships, and it's just crucial for PSH to be effective in housing the most vulnerable, because it depends on who you're working with, but every landlord is different and every complex is different, and then your on-site management is going to be different, and it's really critical that they know that you're there as a partner, and you're going to advocate. It's not always easy. And we can't forget that we are not landlords, we're advocates for our families to be able to stay housed. And so we do advocate, but but you have to do it in a way that you continue a long-term relationship with these landlords. And you have to have increased communication. It's just got to be daily. And we have had some evictions due to just basic safety issues and other issues, but it's the last step if other interventions have been utilized. And then the kind of nice thing about Samm, and I know this is just a blessing and luxury that we do have, is that we have other private funding. So when we're looking at a family that just can't stay, that is going to be evicted, we will then talk to our private prevention director and see if we can rehouse the individual or family through our private dollars. Because we just really don't want to put someone back to the shelter just because they've had an incident that's causing them to be evicted at this particular complex. So we'll use our private dollars. Sometimes you other dollars, but in general we'll look at our private dollars. Sometimes they could go to transitional housing, but we really try to look at making sure that they don't return to homelessness or even whatever kind of shelter. So those are that kind of covers most of. I'm sorry I talked so long. I probably went over my time, but we're all doing good work, and I know that you all have programs that are wonderful also. And I just kind of wanted to look at those local factors and think about some of the research that's been out there, and think about how we place our permanent supportive housing into the future, and when we develop new permanent supportive housing. So thank you so much, and that's what I have.
Great.
And
great.
Any questions or comments? Or?
Yeah,
Yep.
Trenton, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to give the screen control back this way.
Okay.
And let's make sure we got this all on right. So, so wonderful. Thank you so much for just the background information, how things work, and how how things started. So that's wonderful. Now it's time to answer some questions. So if you guys have put some questions in there, that's great. If you do not, or if you've not asked any questions yet, then feel free to type in your questions now. So we'll give you guys just a few minutes. I was trying to, not a whole lot of questions at this time. So Trenton, what is, I just have a quick question as
Sure.
far as you spoke a lot about the permanent supportive housing piece.
Yeah.
What is the relationship that Samm Ministries has with the local, with SARA, the local coalition?
Sure.
How does that work? Can you explain a little bit about that while we're waiting for some questions to come in?
Sure. So we're a provider member of SARA, and we've recently reorganized SARA, the San Antonio, South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless. So we have a community board of directors, and then there's a staff that Bill handles, and we're a provider member of that. So we serve on various subcommittees. So for example, I'm on the coordinated entry subcommittee, and we're actually that's probably the next big thing we have coming up in San Antonio. We're not there yet, but we are close to really getting a true coordinated entry system within San Antonio the way we want it. And Sarah's been taking the lead on that. We are part, but we're part of Sarah. We pay dues and be part of that, and we it helps us work within that continuum of care within San Antonio. It pulls it together. So
awesome.
That's and we've been part of Sarah for as long as, well, for quite a while. I'm not sure from the very beginning, but a long time.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you very much for giving us a little
Sure.
explanation there. We did have, so we have a question that's come through. The question is, how do you or how does Samm Ministries manage single adult homelessness, or even maybe from a perspective of how does San Antonio manage single adult homelessness?
Sure. So I'll try to answer both a little bit, the best I can. So from Samm Ministries' perspective, we have the programs that we have targeted right now towards single adults is both our rapid rehousing program, and single adults can also utilize our homeless prevention program. So it's the homeless prevention program isn't restricted to families only. So we have a rapid rehousing contract with the city that in particular focuses on single adults, and single adults who are probably have higher VI-SPDATs than is traditionally utilized for rapid rehousing. And so it's been a challenge so far, because rapid housing should be that mid-range on the VI-SPDAT, but that's one where we're doing single adults, and also our private prevention for single adults. We do not do emergency shelter, so that's one area of the continuum that we're not a part of. In San Antonio in general, we have a wonderful large campus called Haven for Hope, and Haven has a two-tier process. They have something called Prospects Courtyard, which is just called the Courtyard today, and it's basically a safe sleeping space for single men or women with very low barriers to entry to there. I mean, basically, you can't be an active threat of violence to yourself or others, and not have a weapon on you because there's a search. But other than that, you can free to come to Prospects Courtyard, and then from that we have the campus itself, where there's a men's dorm, a single woman's dorm, there's in-house recovery. So there's a range of services there that meet single adults. And Salvation Army in town also has an emergency shelter that will serve single adults, and we have a couple smaller rescue mission style emergency shelters, but that's all on the emergency shelter side, and I think that from a PSH side we are lacking in a response for single adults. Asked for more permanent supportive housing in this bonus round. We've asked for more with it being targeted to single chronically homeless. So that's our goal. But I would say that right now in San Antonio, that's an area that we need to develop. We need to develop more PSH for singles.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, definitely need more permanent supportive housing for the single individuals.
Yep.
So there was another question, or maybe even just kind of a statement talking about the Katrina research.
Yeah.
And when folks return to their neighborhoods, it is unlikely that they had supports typical of permanent supportive housing.
Yep.
So perhaps with adequate or more than adequate permanent supportive housing, the rates would have been much less. And then this individual goes on to say that that they think being housed with in a complex with other individuals that are chronically homeless might serve as informal or kind of formal permanent supportive housing, or kind of, I'm sorry, serve as informal if that permanent supportive housing does not exist.
Okay. Yeah.
So so that's a good statement. And that that could serve, but definitely having permanent supportive housing as it exists and having it be adequate would be definitely a positive.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Any other questions? This is your time to type in a question if you have a question, or if you have a brief statement. That is great too. So feel free to take a couple minutes. Well, Trenton, I just, as people might be adding in a late-minute question, I did want to thank you for the great presentation and the research that you guys have done. It sounds like, especially with the recent goings-on of the restructuring of Sarah and such, things are really starting to pick up there, and really have some robust services in the San Antonio area. So good. Well, I don't think we have any other questions. It sounds like everybody understands, and some great information that was put out. So with that, Trenton, I want to thank you for being online today, and I'm gonna and just at that, I did attach Trenton's PowerPoint on the tab over to the right-hand side that says handouts. And so if you want to go to that and upload it, that's great. Feel free to look at that. Also, here in a few minutes when I do close us out, you will, all the individuals that are attending will receive an invitation to fill out an evaluation. Please do that for us. We do look at those every month, and we do try to take in information from that and use that to kind of steer where we're going with our monthly webinars and the topics that are out there. So please just take a few minutes to fill that out. It is not very long at all, I promise. And I just, once again, Trenton, I wanted to thank you for being here and giving all the great information. And so what we will do is we will plan our meeting again next month. I don't have a date at this time, but as I mentioned before, we will be hopefully talking to some of the Waco area providers and their what they're doing around housing and the provision of housing. That'll be in late May, typically the second Tuesday from second to last Tuesday is what I'm trying to say. And then finally, just want to leave you guys with my information. So again, Chris Linenberger, and my contact information there, as well as our general email address for the Texas Homeless Network. So if you have any other suggestions that you cannot get into the evaluation, please feel free to shoot me an email. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Thanks again to Trenton and for Bill also for being on the line with us today. And you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and a great evening. Thank you guys. Chris. All right, thank you guys very much.